Today is a little different for me, and maybe for some of you who come to my meetings, because I'm going to share more about my own personal journey. So my own journey may have some themes for you that resonate and that are similar, and it may not. Because each person, if you hear squeaking, it's my dog. She's got a little toy. It's incredibly unique, right? Each person's journey, and it's meant to be just as unique as you are. You know, like a snowflake. We're each different. And God is I like to use the word God, that, intelligence. I just interchange it. God is, everything in creation, and is ourselves in expression, getting to know itself through this expression, through our senses, through our mind, through the body itself. It's getting to know itself. And to me, that's evolution. It's an evolutionary thing. So there's an aspect to God that is evolutionary, and it's made of time. And time is form. Our bodies are form. So this is changing. We're changing. The earth is changing, mountains are changing. Everything in creation is growing, right? So there's an aspect to God that is evolving and changing. And so my personal journey, like your personal journey, is an evolving one. As we grow in awareness of the truth of what we are. And the truth of what we are is the same truth as everything. And we have different words for it, and belief systems that arise around it to help make sense, right? And over time, it's good to leave behind belief systems and find out for ourselves what's true. And use our own being as an experiment. And tell ourselves the truth along the way, what's going on, you know? There's no way to hide and run away from what's really happening. So, where do I start? I have all these notes. Yeah, I touched on evolution. And I also want to mention and bring in the fact that it's really grace that is making everything happen. Whether we're aware of it or not, you know, it doesn't always feel like it. The refining process isn't always pleasant. Being refined and alchemized and going from lead to gold, or whatever you want to call it, you know, is the spiritual journey that is. I'm not a Christian or a Buddhist or a Hindu or anything. It feels like I've probably been everything. Sufi, earth-based tradition. I feel like I've done it all almost. I mean, there's probably some traditions I haven't done, but in my various lifetimes. So in essence, I'm really a mystic. And I mean, of course, mystic, you leave behind everything. But we're all wired in different kinds of ways, right? And I just kind of been a person who has mystical experiences of the type of being visited by, so, guides and beings, and I think mostly from like the Hindu pantheon, and probably because of past times of being connected. I think it just takes on the archetype that we're familiar with. I've been mother oriented, divine mother oriented, and then Christ and Mary are a part of my journey, and then these different types of teachers, Amma, Ninkroli Baba, and Mother Mary, Christ, and Padmasambhava. That one goes way far, far, far back. And then beyond, I'm sure, and the earth herself. That she's I would say she's my main teacher, at least while being here. To me, the earth is a being. So I'm coming out of hiding here and sharing with you all some things that may resonate with you in your own way and may not. And I respect that. I mean, some people are more like a Zen oriented type, and don't have those kind of archetypal energies come and visit and support. I really feel like I've been supported and guided. And even when I felt like there was no but being there to help me for any length of time, which has happened, that too was a teaching. To have everything go away and to not have any beings support me and be left all alone here with just simply what is. And actually really loved it. Ended up really falling in love with what is, the simplicity. Because contained within what is everything. It's the miraculous. So I remember when I was in Austin, Texas. So I was raised mostly in Europe, and we moved to Austin when I was 14. And I had a friend, probably when I was around 19 or so, and she played the guitar, and we made up some songs. And I was so interested in spirituality, but I hadn't yet moved into yoga and meditation. So I was kind of like on the cusp of being really nature oriented and interested in psychic phenomena. How do you say that word? And things more of that nature. And then right after that period of time is when I discovered yoga. But we wrote a song about listening to the river. We were sitting by a river. And there's a line that we wrote that to me kind of sums up as a metaphor my life, my journey, my spiritual journey. And the line is, listen to the river. It has all the answers that you're looking for. It has all the answers that you're searching for, the river. And so my relationship to a metaphorical river has been such that first I was sitting on the banks of the river, we're writing this song, singing, with a wisdom that already was there, that the river contained the answers, But how does one get those answers? And I knew I wanted to be in the river, merged with the river, one with the river. be part of the flow. And that whole process of of seeing the river as outside of myself first, to stepping in and out of the river, being one with the river. When I stepped in, and everything would fall away, and I'd be like, I'm home again. This longing for home was pulling on me since I was a little kid. And some of you know my story. I'm gonna move this down a little bit. Some of you know my personal story, that I was in. What I now can see, looking back, is there was this feeling of unity, of oneness, and that started to dissipate between 7 and 9, and it was heartbreaking for me. Some of you may remember feeling the oneness as a child, and when that started to slip away. Could be very young. For me, it was between 7 and 9, and I think part of the reason why it was so long lasting is because I had my brother, who was exactly 1 year and 2 weeks younger than I. So very close in age. And we just had this like oneness bubble of communication between us. And what kind of lied outside of that oneness bubble, to me, sometimes it made sense. It seemed to be part of the oneness, and like my parents, what would make sense, they seemed to be in alignment with themselves and the adult world and so on. And at other times, they just seemed crazy. They seemed alien to me, and it was always when they started to go into personality, and they would shift from being like present and one with themselves. Really, it wasn't their fault. This is all unconscious. And then they would shift into being a person, And I'd look at them and I'd be like, who is this person? This is not my mom. This is not my dad. It wasn't fun. It wasn't super fun. It was a little bit disconcerting. I wouldn't say scary, but disconcerting. So my brother and I, we maintained this oneness bubble, but when I started going to school, and that world started to take away even more innocence, the linear world of learning, and more personality, right? More ideas and beliefs, started to infringe on this feeling of oneness. So my feeling is that I came in with some type of a semi-stability and oneness. It wasn't stable enough to withstand the Maya of this current world. Perhaps, like in a time in India, or another time that was less complicated, and maybe less people on the planet, and less, just less people, and I'm trying to find the word. Well, less noise, I suppose, in the space. So anyway, I'm guessing that the oneness wasn't all the way stabilized, and so it was shaky. And between 7 and 9, it started to get rocky. And can you imagine? I mean, some of you may, I hope, know what it feels like to feel the wholeness and the remembering inside, even if it comes and goes. I hope that you have that to some degree, and that's what we're wanting to stabilize and to have all the time, right? Really, it's our wholeness. It's our own true nature that we're longing for. So when that started to ebb, I was aware of it, and I didn't have the words, and I tried to tell my parents and all this about it, and they didn't really understand. They thought it was probably just part of growing up, losing innocence, the childhood going away. But that oneness bubble never left with my brother. So it didn't completely leave. And there were a few people over time that I was lucky enough, and I was always looking in people's eyes. Do you ever do that, or did you ever used to do that? look at people's eyes and wonder if who was home and if they were home and could they see you, you know? And it wasn't like a personal seeing, but it was like that, which is seeing. And so my brother and I, we just always saw. It wasn't even there, sometimes gone, other times it was always there. So you can see how that maintained a little thread, right? That maintained a thread. But still, that doesn't mean that the rest of it wasn't painful, because separation hurts. I'd love to see some people here nod their heads if they know what I'm talking about. Do you know how separation hurts? Yeah. Why else would we go looking for ourselves if we weren't in pain? It's like a big clue that something's wrong. So I was kind of fortunate. I mean, I've had, like all of us here, probably a very mixed life. Some things were good and some things were good and bad. And I went to boarding school at 9. And I went to an international boarding school in Switzerland. And the reason I know why I went as a sole choice is because the director of the school was awake. Now I know that. He was awake. He was from Tunisia. He had been adopted at like 14, and he wanted to be a priest, and he ended up running this rather small, only 55 student international boarding school, and he was incredible. And we had like a father-daughter love. I mean, it was instant. It was just like, and he had children, and I became friends with the children and over time. So, but a deep soul connection. And that's why I was there. But, of course, being away from family at 9 is probably not the wisest thing in some ways. But I got a spiritual father. So at 9 for 3 years, and then some summers, so almost 4 years, I had a spiritual father. And the love that he emanated and was so nourishing. And then, of course, I got to go home to my family, and they loved me. They really did, my parents. And my brother was with me in the school. So a rather interesting upbringing in a way. I think I was meant to be really, truly a world citizen. I could never feel like I was an American. My father was American, and I never really felt like I was anywhere in Europe, particularly. So I think that's just part of my personal journey. Apparently it's actually in my astrology. You know how some things can be that in the written in the stars. So so when I came to Austin and experienced more painful separation, because isn't high school a great place to experience separation? For the most part. And I would say that was probably around that period was probably the most lost that I felt. Still close to my brother, but didn't really have anything to hold on to. Didn't have any ground beneath me that to help make sense of my life. And it was right. I actually graduated myself early at 16. Got the heck out of there. They had an early graduation program, and I went to college beginning right before my 17th year. And my life got better. It just improved slowly. I had a best friend who shared that oneness bubble with my brother and I, so the three of us were like pals. Oh, what a relief to just be in this little pod together, And we were really interested in like mind reading and cool stuff like that. We would think a thought and see if the person could, hear it. And we were pretty good at it. We were very connected, very empathic with one another, I would say. And it kind of just, I don't know, it was like a wonderful bridge to what was coming next for me in my life. And I would say that another thing that really nourished me is I would go visit my grandmother in Germany, and she was very spiritual. And I think I kind of took up after her a bit. Like, she was probably the person that I most connected with on the spiritual level in my family. And she lived on the edge of the Black Forest, and I would go into the Black Forest with her dog, walk her dog every day, and I would just feel the trees. I just started having a deep connection with trees. Does anybody here have feel connected to trees? Yeah. Yeah, they're beings, right? And they would communicate with me, and I just felt at home. And of course, there was a feeling like a union and also a separation. And I would cry, and my heart would break with the longing to I don't know, to be connected to them, to be one with them. And I would hug them. I was really a tree hugger, really like a literal tree hugger. And hug them and get nourishment. Always come back and feel like my eyes and my head was all opened up. I felt like this whole space was like open, and like I was perceiving from a place that was more integrated, because they communicate in a very different way, not from the mind. So I think nature just really helped me to learn how to communicate in another way, which I find very important in the spiritual journey, is to realize that we have all these different ways of communicating. We have the senses, we have the body, we have the heart, the mind, and the belly, right? All these different ways that we gain information and that we can access in life, be a part of life. And because I was raised and having to learn a lot of different languages, that opened something up in me too, because I would understand, and many of you who know about languages or maybe music or what else? Well, creative arts, dancing, painting, different ways of communicating, really. That it's not necessarily a linear way that opens up, a linear way of communicating. So if you learn a different language, especially if you're being immersed in it, you understand it way before you know how you understand it. And that was very helpful to me, to learn, to see that I didn't have to learn things. That's not the way I learned, wasn't through linear understanding, through the mind. And so my mind didn't necessarily think I didn't find out till later. Some of you may have heard this in some of my interviews and so on. I didn't find out till later that I didn't really think in thoughts in sentences. And I didn't realize that was not necessarily the way everybody operates. And many of you know now through your journey of meditation and sensing into yourselves that you're not thinking with thoughts. Do some of you know that? It's like thoughts are not necessary to your operating system. They're kind of incidental. So, of course, as a personal self, which is the personal self is really a part of is part and parcel of our journey. It's not a mistake. And the self center, it really it gets its like orientation to how to do things quite often through the mind, you know. And so the mind helps make sense of our reality. It's a great tool, but it isn't the way that we discover about ourselves. We can't find ourselves through the mind. We can't think ourselves back to origin, right? So I did have to quiet down. I mean, a lot of people have to quiet down mind to come to what lies underneath all that busyness and all the words, and right, because I did have to quiet down, but I didn't have to quiet down mind. I had to quiet down. I think I'm more of a, we have different types of intelligences. Everybody does. We're all wired differently. And I think I was more probably emotion oriented or sensing, not sensing free of feeling. More now I'm just sensing. That's really my operating system. But before it was kind of like a mishmash of feeling, sensing, emotion, and maybe a little bit of visual, like a little visual, being able to see things in terms of visual, but not as a. Do some of you know who Rick Archer is? Yeah, some of you here. Yeah. Well, anyway, he's a friend, and he, you know, Rick Archer can be funny sometimes. And he said, "Do you think maybe you're autistic?" You know. And I'm like, "Why?" Because I don't think in thoughts. Anyway, it was sort of halfway in jest, but still didn't really get it, I guess, which is fine. But it's just more of a side note in terms of I found it was kind of humorous. So good thing I didn't talk about it. I could have been labeled. So what do I want to say here? Where was I? Yeah, so the river. Okay, so the river metaphor. So do some of you can, let's see if you can relate to my river metaphor. First, there's this knowing that it's just an intelligence that is guiding home. And so it knows that there's something about an inner stream, an inner guidance system. Really, the river represents an inner guiding system, home, right? The river, and it guides you home. So the whole relationship with the river for me was one of gaining trust. You know, will I be swallowed up by the river? How much can I go in the river and not be lost? If I let go, what would happen? Does this resonate? Like if you let go into your being, what would happen to the sense of you? Even though the you is really what wants to go home. So yeah, I would take dunks in the river and come back out. And then eventually just like started to float in it, you know? And like have sojourns of floating down the river and feeling held and loved and supported and one with. But there was still a relationship to it, is my point. There was still being in a relationship with this divine energy inside. And I think the relationship was one of learning how to gain trust. I mean, I work with a lot of people and it's very similar to myself in the way that the more that we let go into trust, actually, the more that you get what it is that you're wanting. So the trust is the personal will that is slowly being worn down. Your personal will. And eventually there's, a real shift that happens. And there's, and that whole process, that's your spiritual journey. That's the spiritual journey, your own personal journey. Is this shift from feeling like it's outside of you to you feel like it's a part of you, but there's still a relationship. And then that relationship is growing and you grow in trust and devotion. Oh, and I just want to bring that in. I was very devoted to truth, a real bhakti, praying in my way. We all have a way of praying that's our own way, which is really your longing. Your longing is your prayer. Your longing for wholeness is your prayer for something. And this whole journey is really meant to happen because there's a lot of learning that takes place through feeling separate and then coming back home. A lot of learning. And also the ability to be aware and self-conscious wouldn't take place if we didn't have the feeling of being separate. So we wouldn't be able to look at ourselves and feel what we're feeling and know what's going on. We'd be more like animals, is how I like to put it, without the ability to be self-aware. So there are so many spiritual experiences I wrote about. You know what? I'm just going to probably not talk about them all and put them in my book. Besides, it'll make this too long. The spiritual experiences tie in with the learning that took place. It's not just for fascination's sake. But one of them was that I used to go on retreats. So I was a single mom for many years, and I really needed my personal retreats because I was like, I had two modes going on at one point. So I was like a very devoted mother, and I knew as a little girl that I was going to have 2 children, and that's what I wanted to do, is to be a mom. And so I went from over time being a mother to knowing mother and knowing myself as that. It was also a journey, the mother journey. So I would take these breaks and go to a personal retreat at the Vedanta Retreat Center in Olima, Marin. And it's an amazing place. And I had so many realizations there. So grateful. I feel like I left a part of me there. No, it gave me a part of me. It was founded by, I believe, Vivekananda. So it's he founded it, and so it's almost 2,000 acres of old growth woods, right? One little hill away from the ocean, and so incredibly beautiful and potent. And I don't know, I just found sanctuary there, and I went there for about 6 years, and I had a lot of my realizations and deepenings there. It's like, I was being mother, and things were happening at the same time. I couldn't stop the train. The train was going fast, and that was the train of going home. I couldn't get off the train. It was what I wanted my whole life. So of course I was totally along for the ride. And I really didn't end up having a great career or personal life in terms of being somebody in life. It didn't, because I just, from the time I lost the sense of self, of wholeness. I'll get to that in a minute about self. But since I lost it, all I really wanted, and I did it, not always in a wise way, all I wanted was to have it back. So I wasn't really interested in creating a persona. I knew about persona at a young age. I already knew what felt false. I knew, and I'm not making myself special. I feel like my journey is everybody's journey who wants to go home in some way, It doesn't matter where I entered the stream. So, being a person and finding fulfillment in that is not wrong. In fact, I wish it for my kids. Go be a person and in the fullest way, if you want it. Yeah, in fact, having my kids, I really learned a lot about the ego and the building of personal self, and I really saw its wisdom. So, well, I'm going on a lot of side little trails. Yeah, so I was at the Olima one time during one of my weekends, or I used to take 4 or 5 days while the kids were with their dad. And it would just be like, boom, finally my body got to relax. And I would spend about a day crying. I don't know if anybody resonates with that. You don't have to cry to resonate with it. Maybe it's screaming. I don't know. But it's like a way of just releasing all the gunk that all the ways of holding it together, really, for me. It wasn't wrong or bad, but just having to show up in the world really when I had this internal vision pulling me back. It was almost like this gravitational force pulling me back to go back home and to remain and try to be in the world, to do these things sometimes was really hard. So I would spend, one whole day just releasing the energy of that. And then I'd be in the grace of feeling my wholeness again. The oneness and the nature really supported that. And then some kind of deepening would take place. Like it was just waiting there for me to have another understanding or deepening. And one of the deepenings has to do with the I. And I was kind of part of listening to the river is when you learn to listen, you have to follow direction. So if you really want truth, you have to follow the direction that you're getting, right? You get more of it. So you get more of the truth. So I've become really adept, like an antenna, like learning a language, I'd say, really. The most important language of your life is following this, the guidance of truth, of inner knowing, which I use the metaphor of the river, right? But that guidance, it's really, it knows how to bring you home. It's not confused. So aligning with that is super important, however you do that. And you get more of it by saying yes, even if it doesn't look like, doesn't make sense to oneself or to the outer world. It's a trial and error kind of thing until you keep hitting the note that it's telling you, and you start to see there's a wisdom here and it knows what it's doing. And then you end up living that way. You stop playing hide and seek with that knowing. You end up living it. And you become one with it. Stopping in relationship to it, you actually become the listening to the river. You become it. So I heard this knowing, voice, whatever. I never really heard voices, but it was kind of almost like that. Go and back to the room. I was walking on the hills and meditate. So I went back, and this happened several times in different ways. So I was taken back to myself as an infant or a baby. I wasn't an infant, I was a baby in my little bed. And my brother was in the room. We shared a room, and he was born. So he was already probably a couple months old, and I must have been a year and a couple months, something like that. And he was kind of making his goo goo gaga noises, and we were communicating. I was responding, goo goo gaga, gurgle gurgle, whatever babies do, right? And I suddenly, in this memory, I was back and I was there. There was this moment where I realized as a body, as a baby body, that the sounds that were coming towards me and the sounds I were making were not the same. That what was the sounds that I was making was coming from this body. And suddenly a body sense took place. And the I was born, the I. And so that was so liberating to go back. And I think one of the main reasons was the birth of I, really. And I saw the innocence of it. And I saw the intelligence of it. The birth of I, so much in a lot of spirituality kind of makes this I wrong and vilifies it in different ways because of the trouble that it leads to. But originally it's innocent. And I think the reason it went back to that point is because it was being undone. It wasn't just the wisdom, oh, that's the innocence of the I, and this is when it was formed and all that. It was being undone. And so I'll come now to the emptiness piece of my journey. Is this interesting at all? Okay, cool. I don't want to bore you to tears, but if you are bored, it's fine too. So you can leave. But it's nice. Okay, back to the story. So I just wanted to bring in the emptiness piece because it's not all about oneness, right? And the fulfillment of wholeness and all that. That is just that's a big piece of it. Our divine nature is the wholeness. But God and that or whatever is not only form, it's not only made of consciousness and stuff and, right? Love and everything. Being. That being is the form stuff. But the divine, what we are, is equally empty of content, and they've proven that scientifically, right? So the wisdom, and it might be true for you too, there may be kind of like this flow of sometimes there's a real period of time, years maybe, of wanting to go back home and sense your wholeness. And I think that for me, for sure, that was the first movement. But then and before it was completely set in place, like really like a kachink, no abiding, where it never moved again, and abiding oneness was a done deal. Before that happened for me, I was visited by this really who am I kind of journey, the spontaneity and the intelligence of the way that this moves. We don't have to learn it through a book, okay? Books can be nice, for me at least, as a reference after the fact. And sometimes even like some prelude, like, oh, this is going to come, maybe, out of trust of some of these amazing beings, which we have, in our history. We're so lucky to have these. We're inheritors of the journey of the human wisdom journey and evolutionary journey. We're inheritors. So we get to take part in what has already, these path makers. We don't have to start all over from scratch with every single thing. But we do have to have the experience ourselves. So who am I spontaneously came in. And sometimes I'm bad at remembering things. I don't know if I had found out about Ramana before that happened or not, so I can't make a definitive statement about that. But anyway, it was authentic for me, an authentic arising. And that's why when I talk to people, work with people, or just contemplate the spiritual journey for people, I really think the most important support and thing to just acknowledge is that each person has the internal knowing of how to go about going back home, and that part of them is really the divine, is God. And just to recognize that, okay, where are you in this journey, you know? So the who am I, or what am I, or what is this? And I have to say that definitely was there through my whole 20s too. How could it not be? You know, existence looking at itself. Well, right? It's not just wanting to go home, but it's also existence looking at itself. Well, why am I even here? What the heck? You know? That's just intelligence, you know? That's really the deepest that mind can do. The most powerful use of mind is to look at itself. And to reach its own limit. So that was happening. The mind was turning on, was doing this, like, you know, those things that, you know, what were those those things that you just turn, and those, anyway, those cubes, and you turn and turn to get all the right colors, you know, those, I forgot the name, that they used to play with kids before the current the current way that people kids play these days online. But yeah, it was like that. My mind was just trying to find itself. And it would wake up in the middle of the night trying to find itself. I felt like I was, Rubik's Cube. I think that's what it's called. So it was like a big Rubik's Cube up here. And it was like trying to find a koan without having an active koan. It was more like the koan was doing itself at some point. And the mind was really trying to find its cause, I guess, its origin. You know, I don't know how to put it exactly. And really what it is doing, it's nullifying itself. Right? And so it can't find an answer. And so what about this way? And what about that way? It's not through words that it does it. It's more, that's jnana yoga. That's the ultimate of jnana yoga. So, you know, first there was a lot of bhakti that wanted to go home. The bhakti is longing for itself, right? The seeker longs to go home. The seeker is a wise thing. It's seeking for itself. And then the jnana piece comes in, and it wants to know itself and really solve this riddle. Does this make sense? Like, who am I riddle? And Ramana knew this. That's why he brought that piece in. And so, and that's all intelligence guiding. And while this was happening, you know how people will say, you know, that beliefs are not, you know, you discover that beliefs are not true. And for me, like, meaning was taken away, all meaning. And because I'm kind of a dramatic type, mystical type person, it was actually like bled out of me visually, you know, like I started to see more in, and it's weird that I didn't get weirded out about it, but it was in black and white and gray, like even color started to seep out of reality. And the meaning of words, like meaning got bled out. That's kind of like a radical way to put it, but it got bled out. And more like first formlessness of things appeared, the formless nature of things. So that's how radical it got for me. And can you imagine parenting two young kids? It's kind of amazing that happened. I think they're okay. They're okay. But anyway, I would drop them off at school, at kindergarten and first grade, and I would go and just in my car and stare at things. I just go and park and stare at things because it was fascinating. Trees were, everything didn't have meaning anymore. It was more like ghostly. More ghostly is how I want to put it. The substance, like what happens, okay, this is my understanding, is that when we learn language and we're taught the meaning of things through language and just through the conditioning of our well-meaning parents and adults and stuff, teachers, it turns everything into an object. And of course, we have to be a subject to see an object. So the subject, it reinforces the subject. It reinforces the feeling of being separate from this object that we're seeing. And then we give it a name, and it makes it even more of a something. So to have something come back to its true nature without our superimposing onto that reality our meaning is it's returning back to source. It's like we have a power to objectify something, create something out of it, turn a tree into a word, into an object, right? A person, turn ourselves. That's the biggest trick, right? Turning ourselves into an object. So, and so we're not seeing clearly. That's why we feel separate from all these objects in our environment. Is we feel disconnected because we're not seeing clearly. Make sense? So during this returning home process of back to the formless, those words came later. I just have to tell you, I did not have understanding of that. And one of the reasons why it's so good and important to develop trust along the way of this river that's taking you home, which is you're going home, is that these kind of things that take place, if they do take place in the radical way, don't scare you to death. Yeah, I mean, can you imagine you're seeing shades of gray and everything's kind of flat and wasn't scared at all. I was fascinated. And I'm not making it special. It's because it is cool. It is so cool going home. The whole thing is an amazing miracle journey. And if you have trust that you're in good hands because you are that, and God is doing this because it bursts itself and then it takes itself home. And you'll have your own unique way of going home. Your way. It could be very, very seamless for you, very simple, not dramatic. I hope you don't think it has to be just because of what I'm sharing. So maybe I just like dramatic gods and goddesses. I like Kali, and I like all these dramatic, crazy beings. So off with your head. So yeah, that took about 2 years, and a lot of my life, my experiences of my spiritual journey are interwoven with personal experience of life events. So my brother died, and that snapped me out of a certain trance. So I'm just using this as an example, really big example, of how life events will be used to grow us up and help liberate us, really. Not that they're wonderful in themselves, but that can be the effect. And so I was snapped out of the trance at the time and propelled into deep emptiness, because I made a vow while within a day that he died that I was going to go with him and find out where he went. Not with I didn't want to die, but I wanted to find out where he was going because our connection was so deep. I didn't want to abandon him. And so we were one in life. I wanted to be one in death. I see that now. And so it was already probably predetermined that this would take place. In a way, I kind of feel like we were so connected that maybe my journey was his journey and his journey was my journey. So I tracked him for 2 weeks and something like that. Some time is a little nebulous. At night, while my kids were sleeping, and I just would lay there. We did a family bed. They were little. I shared a family bed with them, and I would just lay there and just track where his spirit was going, his soul, his essence, and then eventually it just disappeared into nothing. It just fizzled out. No more trace. No more Daniel. So when that happened, there was a part of me that was no more. And I think that's just the way it's been. That's part of the major undoing is going back to the unborn. However you end up going back in terms of your spiritual journey, there's going back to the unborn while being alive. So part of you is not here. Part of you is dead. And what part would that be? So that part, trying to think at that time what part that might be. I don't think that it's something that is really made of something. It feels truly absent. It's not just empty of form per se. It's more like emptiness and form co-arise, and what is before that, what lies even before that co-arising. Emptiness and form are kind of two parts of one piece. But there is something that is even before that. And if that makes sense at all to anybody, maybe just get a feeling for it. It's totally unmanifested. It doesn't have a nature. It doesn't even have an emptiness nature, is what I want to say. It's not even empty of something. So I like to do this, as many of you who are been traveling with me for a while here. I do this thing where I go like this, and this is emptiness, this is form, and they're part of one whole. That's what we are. That's what everything here in awareness is. And it's not like I understand everything. Because that would be mental anyway, but there's so much I don't know, and I don't know if it's available while being in a body. So, and it's not like I'm looking to know it either, There's a time that looking ends, the desire to know ends. So after the emptiness piece really, I think, had its time, and I had a cool experience during this time period Or I used to get a lot of stuff from dreams. I don't know if anybody else here is like this, where I was taught a lot or just instructed through dreams. A lot of like like dreams of the chakras opening up, that was before the emptiness piece, have to be honest. Like that was like, I'd wake up and I'd be like stuck to the wall, and it'd be a triangle that I'm stuck to, just really bizarre stuff, and I knew that it was working on a chakra or something, and not that I was chakra identified. But it's cool how so many of these traditions can come up and reveal themselves as having reality for oneself. Like I went through a real Kundalini Shakti time during my meditation years, and I literally could feel the force of Shakti, of Kundalini, going through my system. And sometimes it would be obstructed, and I would have to go through some stuff. And those times it would just glow, and there would be a lot of release. And it felt like there was this vacuum cleaner. I called it like my divine vacuum cleaner was going through my system. And it was just like, it was like a divine vacuum cleaner that turned everything into dancing particles of light. And it was harmonizing the system. It was creating harmony and sucking up everything that didn't belong there. But to me, that was the wisdom of Shakti moving through. And I was a big time meditator. I left that piece out in my 20s. I did hours of yoga and hours of meditation for about 10 years, 8 years. I was just driven. It wasn't anything that I was told to do, or no beliefs here about what was supposed to happen, but just was driven to it. And the yoga helped purify the body. It helped harmonize the conditioning that was held in the flesh. And it wasn't all easy. I had some healing crises that took place. I had walking pneumonia for a while. I knew it was a healing crisis. Dispelling this crap out that I had taken in over time, And the meditation was just like getting familiar with that river and going home and being in a one-pointed stream, and just loving it so much I didn't want to leave. But that really just got the Shakti going, the Kundalini. And no one had told me about this stuff. I had to find out about it. And this is before the internet, y'all. I was in Austin. So this is before the internet. And someone wanted to come in. Okay. And I'm actually grateful that I did this before the internet. I don't actually believe in my heart that finding your way to yourself through the internet is necessarily the way to go. I'll just be honest. You found me. But there's good things, haha. But I mean, there's also for sure really good things, but it's easy to get distracted. And then to go for 5 minutes with this teaching and 5 minutes with that teaching and get bored and think it's not doing anything. And, rather than digging that one well down, that you hear about, that used to be the way to go. And really becoming a guide upon yourself is really what's supposed to happen, to be your own Sadguru. It's hard to do if we're looking on the outside and projecting on the outside where that we're going to get some information. Make sense? All this outside leaning into the world for anything. Of course things appear, and they're meant to. We're not like islands upon ourselves, but we're meant to just take information and have it if it resonates, and then apply it. So I wanted to bring in the Kundalini piece because I don't really talk about that much, and just not to hide it, but because honestly, I forget my own personal journey and how useful certain things might be to talk about in case that's something you go through. All I can say is, to me, Shakti is divine intelligence that lives in the body and is made of Mother Divine, Mother being form, not necessarily the absolute energy per se, but more as the intelligence of form. And it knows, it has a journey, it knows how to bring this vehicle home. And I've seen for myself that there are different intelligence centers. And so these different intelligence centers that we contain are cleared and activated by this divine intelligence. And you may feel it and you may not. It doesn't mean it's not happening. You don't have to believe this system anyway, but just check it out for yourself, you know. Does the body seem to have a divine intelligence to it? Is it clearing out? How does it do so? You know? So there, yeah, you know, and different things can happen with Kundalini. You know, one time I was sitting, and the Kundalini just shot up, and it blew my head off. And I think I've heard some other people say this has happened to them. And I thought that I was dead. I was only like 23. But of course, you know, if you're thinking that you're dead, you're obviously not dead, I'm guessing. But the way that I knew I wasn't dead is because my heart was beating super fast, you know. And then I've discovered I was still alive. But what it did, it removed some obstruction that was going through. It's not like super mystical. It's like we have these obstructions, you know, in our, like behind, especially right here. Many of us have an obstruction right here in the back of the neck. Because, and of course in the heart, but the back of the neck is like a gateway between the heart and the intelligence center of the head, of the absolute energy here. And that obstruction usually has to do with the lack of trust. Like, I'm not going to let this energy, you know, it's like will force. I'm not going to let it go beyond this place right here. You know, the personal will is like, oh, not going to let it happen. And most of it's unconscious. So for that to kind of burst through could be a little bit radical. So don't be surprised if along the way, and maybe it already has happened, that, you know, some people have kriyas where they just kind of move around in a strange way. I just had a little bit of kriyas, and I could tell that I knew it was energy that wasn't flowing properly. And it was doing it and trying its best to create more harmony so the energy could flow. We don't have to be perfected, let me tell you. I have like cricks and 2 whiplashes, and you know, like, it's not like this body's perfect and not ever in pain or anything. But the energy can flow freely, even if we're having an old body or in pain body, okay? Just so you know. It's more on a subtle level. The nadis, the subtle nadis. This might not be your language. That's okay. So, yeah. So after the emptiness really was becoming more and more familiar. Wow, I sure can talk, huh? Okay. After the emptiness was really had done its thing. Oh, I know what I was going to tell you. I can't believe how I hop around. That's why I'm having a hard time writing a book. Okay, so after some people were writers are laughing. Okay, so one time I woke up in a dream, right? And there was a word. I can't remember the word. It would be fun to remember the word, but it was a long word, long enough that I was like, I woke up in the middle of a word. So I was like, looking to the left, there was the beginning of the word, and I was looking to the right, and there was the end of the word, and I was in the middle. And I realized I had taken possession back of language. Language wasn't owning me anymore, to some degree. If that makes any sense to any people who are into language. Because I've always been into language, language is my thing. Languages and also the invisible language of feeling and sensing and intuiting, all those types of languages. Following, being the river. So once all that was done, then unity really stepped up. Emptiness and form, they want to be, it's a divine marriage. You're looking for the ideal marriage, there you go. You don't have to go looking for it on the outside. The divine marriage that we are, and being at peace with the paradox of this reality of emptiness and form. So then form really moved forward for me to to find out what that's really all about. And that's, I guess the highest knowing that we as in a human form can know about form is feeling unity. Unity consciousness, oneness. Are we really feeling what that thing is upon itself? Not sure, because we always will be sensing through the medium of the body, of the sensing body. So we'll know as far as we can know, as far as this awareness is able to. If that makes any sense, because God or the divine or whatever, and its intrinsic nature of being something, a tree or something, for example. When you're in unity, it's like you sense into the molecules of that tree. For some reason, you can feel what it might be like to be a tree. The bark and wherever you put your attention on, you can suddenly become. But no, I don't know how much of that is still imagination in a way through the sensing body. We can only use what we have as a capacity with our own language knowledge, which includes sensing. But it feels like it. It feels real. There was this moment, I remember I was looking out of the window and I saw a crow. It was so zen. It was such a zen, beautiful poetry moment. And I saw a crow sitting on a branch, and the crow, or maybe there were two, then the crow was eating a plum. And I was like, suddenly, truly, I was the plum that the crow was eating, and I was the crow eating the plum, and I was the tree that the crow was sitting on. You know what I mean? And I was all of it at once. And so that's like a real unity moment. And a lot of poetry comes out of that, the unity time. Rumi and all kinds of ecstatic poetry comes out of that feeling of being one. At that time of that crow, I think I was still flowing in and out of oneness. It wasn't abiding. And when you flow in and out of oneness, it's really ecstatic when the oneness comes. Because it's such a change of a dimensional change of experience. So whenever you shift into another dimension, whether it's an emptiness dimension or a fullness, oneness dimension, there will be byproducts. You'll feel it because it's a different experience, right? That's where you get those mystical kind of awakening type experiences. It's just because it's a different dimension than we're familiar with. So, but there was a moment, and again, it was at Olima, and I really am approaching the end here. There was a moment where I took a walk, and I've written about this before, and it's so simple. They say everything is so simple in the end. And I sat down and I was watching a young buck with little tiny horns nibbling on grass, and I was pretty close. And I used to do this practice, and it's something that I really recommend. Um, and where I would just stare at something or look at something, and especially nature, because nature is so intrinsically itself, it's not divided, right? It's really our greatest teacher. So, so I was looking at this deer, and I was feeling into what thin veil still was lying as an overlay between myself and this young buck. And as so many times before, I felt that veil thin and then part. And boom, I was feeling the oneness with the oneness, not so much in relationship to it. Relationship creates a veil. Yeah. So, and then I got up after a while, and it never went away. That veil never came back. So that, as you can see, I was a child that had been in oneness, but maybe it wasn't solid enough to withstand. It wasn't solid enough to withstand the complicated, complex human created world of separation. And it took that long. How old was I? In my maybe 40. I can't remember how old I was. I'll have to think about that. Wait. No, I was in my late 30s, I think. It doesn't really matter. But it took a long time, obviously, and there were so many journeys to get there. The cleaning out of the body had to happen with all the yoga and the Shakti, the meditation, to really align with the stream of isness, of consciousness that is unimpeded, without being, with being able to orient towards in a focused way. Focus is super important, by the way. To be driven to live that stream, to live undividedly. You have to be completely crazy in love with wanting to go home. That's, the bhakti piece. Like a holy mad person. Holy, like with holes, not necessarily holy. You have to get holy. Empty. And then life still wants to do its journey. There's still things to live out. Like, I wanted to be a mother. I wanted to have a relationship and have that relationship fail. There's a lot of stuff. I wanted to disappoint my dad because I wasn't, whatever, because I was a holy mad woman. Some lives are all about going back home. And this is what my life's about. It was about going back home, not so much building something, even though there were some things to live out. If that makes sense? And I don't want to make anybody's life at all ever wrong. If someone's building up a persona or building up a career or building up this or that, I, had to do a career kind of thing of sorts. We all have to pay the bills. But I truly believe in the intelligence of the whole thing, of the whole journey for everybody. Everybody. It knows what it's doing. And there's no, even making mistakes are not necessarily wrong along the way. They teach And I'll come back to what took place after the unity piece in a moment. But I just wanted to say that I did have one real significant vision, and that took place a couple years before the next shift took place out of unity into, what people can call no self. Um, it's just a word, made up word. Um, but I had a vision, and it really deeply, deeply affected me. And it lasted like an hour and a half. I've never had a vision that long where I was laying down and I just went into this really full on Technicolor, could be a movie in itself vision of the spiritual evolution of humanity and what all this is about in a nutshell. And it really gave me so much trust and understanding of each person's journey being divinely orchestrated, no matter how it looks on the outside or to anyone or to themselves, or even the whole world, the planet as it is. Not that it gave a certain sense of understanding and peace, but it doesn't necessarily make it all okay at all. I'm still very much a human being that cares about people and about creatures and the earth and what we're doing to the earth and so on. It doesn't make one stupid to have these kind of visions. But but so I saw, I was shown, and I was taken through it experientially. It wasn't just like a vision, like a movie. I was really experiencing this vision, this living teaching, really, about how we're all being alchemized and really almost like cooked. We're all being like cooked and turned into, slowly being cooked into Buddhas, into Christs, into whatever you want to call it, and that every single life experience is being used for that end. And then I was shown how deeply caring the intelligence is. It's not like cold and heartless and a mistake. So it was like a different perspective, like a real, I guess, a certain point of view of the divine perspective of this journey of the human being and what it's actually accomplishing. It was really changed me at the way I worked with people after that too, because, and the way I see my kids and their struggles, and it doesn't make it all okay. I deeply care. Actually, the more that you feel, the more you empty out, the more you care, because you are the whole thing. But it took away a hook, a certain hook I had, I guess, unknowing to myself, an unconscious hook of how caring showed up. And that was that I had to be taken down in some way, that my caring was somehow, it was an unconscious thing, probably an agreement from long ago, that to really care, you had to suffer, basically. Co-suffer. So it really took that hook away, which has been much better, really, because it's a free caring. It's a caring it's deeper, actually. So that actually is a landing place, suffering. So it's a deeper caring to care so much that you don't have to co-join in the suffering. Does this make sense at all? Because if you get a picture of the real meaning of this and it feels true to you and it like lands, it there's a trust then of like Actually, there's something very, very intelligent that is doing this whole thing. I don't have to worry on that deepest level. I worry, but the deepest level, I don't have to worry. That's very freeing. So, okay. So the last piece is for me. I'm like going really fast forward because the unity traversing the unity landscape took about 8 years. Um, and I really love the work of Bernadette Roberts, and I just want to give her a little plug here because she really, her writing, in retrospect for me when I found it, really supported my understanding, even though we are so unique, all of us, and my map is not exactly her map. It's a map that is very, very brilliant, and in many ways, it is my map. You know, I'm not a Christian contemplative per se, and a little different in terms of I don't have. I guess I'm more of a body person. I've gone on a more of a body journey, I think, than she did. But it doesn't really matter. I really like a lot of what she says, and I really agree, especially with the map. And how many people are talking about this? Not many. I'm not saying they don't, and it doesn't exist, and I'm not an expert on who's talking about it throughout time. I understand why it's hard to find writing about it because I think people who kind of go off the map, they don't really tend to want to write about it. So anyway, so my whole my whole desire since I was a child was to go back home. I went home. I was home. You know, I was home. Unity is home. And during Unity, it's a whole landscape of, I call it the time of reconciliation, where everything gets reconciled in the heart. Everything that feels dualistic, that doesn't feel integrated, that is still confused inside, that doesn't feel lovable, and even unconscious things that we didn't know we had that kind of surface and like bubbles and says, me too, I want to be included in this heart space. I want to go back home to the heart, you know. Any unworthiness issues, I'm just pulling some out here. Shame, beliefs about oneself, about others, about the world. They, you know, anything that's left over, it even doesn't even have to be beliefs. It can just be a sensing in the body, a place in the body that's confused. The body is a intelligent system. So the body, you know, you really see that the body is has information too that wants to, you know, be seen non-dualistically through the heart. The heart is a non-dual center. So it perceives in a non-dual way everything, all reality. So does that make sense about the heart? And I did a spontaneous 1 year, I think, at least, Ho'onopono prayer, and I have that on my YouTube station. I lead a whole hour almost of that because it was so powerful for me. It just came in to do, and I did it. And I would do it to aspects of myself, this forgiveness prayer, and I would do it to others. I would see a child in the grocery store that was suffering, or a person, or my children, or anything, an animal. And a spontaneous, really non-dual prayer would come up. That was a oneness prayer about loving it and you know, understanding its pain, knowing it as its part, being one with it, really, without confusion. So that takes a long time for most people to, and really the oneness, the unity is really for most people, we're taught and we think, and it's understandable, that that's the end of the road. Do you all know what I'm talking about? I mean, like all the literature, Christian mystical literature for the most part, right? The Hindu Atman, Jiva, soul, Atman, Brahman. It's all about going home and consciousness living as that. And in Buddhism, they talk about no self, but I'm not as clear on whether that's no, like, what Bernadette talks about no ego self, or if that's really a divine unity, no self. I'm guessing that the furthest reaching of it is that, the no unity either. Because I think Buddhism is, I'm sure, taken it to the end, as far as we can go, as far as we know we can go. But there's a lot of confusion along the way. Just, it doesn't really matter as long as you stay focused on what's true for you, and be honest with yourself. We don't really need to get wrapped up in what's being taught so much. Even though I'm doing a map here, in a way, a map that has been true for me. So some of you know that, the story, how it goes is that I was rather ill, and I was having environmental illness, and so the place where I was living wasn't habitable for me. I was getting really sick, and I was my daughter was still living with me. I think she was 16. She's now 21. Yeah, so she was still living with me, 15, 16, and I couldn't house her because I couldn't live in that house, so she was with her dad. And I went to Olima, I went to that retreat center, and there was a storm brewing inside of me, in my gut, in my belly. And here I was in unity, so there was and unity, by the way, it thins out over time to where you don't recognize anymore that you're in unity. I think the end of unity, as you come towards an end, it's so integrated that it's undistinguishable from reality. You can't even say I'm in unity. There's no, the I just feels so swallowed up, by, or the divine I feels so swallowed up that it's hard to distinguish anymore. But apparently unity was still taking place. And you don't think that anything else is coming. At least I didn't. Now we have this Bernadette Roberts map, and my personal map for me says, oh, something else definitely was coming. And when I was 50, I had when I was 49, I had a vision where I saw that at 50 that I would die, that I was like going to be extinguished. I didn't see my body die. I just saw a flame go out in a little visual vision, a flame go out. And the only thing that my whole being could make of it was like, oh my God, maybe I'm going to die. I even started making little plans, like where would about my kids, and not big time, but just, maybe I should take this a bit seriously. Because I couldn't see myself past a certain point. And it was so it was a real, it bored itself into my consciousness. Something was going to happen. So sure enough, in my 50th year, I was there wandering that beautiful landscape on that retreat center. And what was happening inside of me was this grappling with the fact that there was really nothing I could do about my situation, you know. And I think that there must have been still some will force left in the belly area that was imagining that it still had some kind of power to make something better. You know, it was completely extinguished. This like I was in a that whole kind of Rubik's cube of my brain, but I was in the Rubik's cube of my body. I couldn't make it go away. I couldn't figure out and do a Houdini act and make my life better in some way. I couldn't think of how. I didn't have any money, and my health was poor health. I didn't know what, I was kind of like stumped. I was just at an edge of stumpedness. And I think what it was doing too, it was really hitting up against my desire to be a parent and parent adequately. Like I still had identity, I guess, in regards to creating a home for, I mean, a lot of people, they have one last card that isn't played out and you don't know it. You know, even in unity, you don't know it. And that was maintaining support for my daughter, you know. My son was already pretty much on his own. So, so then, you know, so it was just doing this like kind of like figuring out, trying to find a resolution, trying to figure it out, and it finally gave up. Just like the brain at one point had given up trying to find itself and sprung loose. This kind of existential place, it sprung loose for me. And it was where the self was living in the body, is how I see it. Where it was still had a foothold. Nothing wrong with the self. I don't want to make it out wrong. But it just gave up. And sometimes we have to be forced. Our hand is forced, and my hand was forced. I'm kind of in that way too. I mean, it hasn't come easily, all this stuff. I hope you're getting that picture in a way. It's been wonderful and blessed and graced and blissful and blah, blah, blah. But it hasn't all come easy. A lot of it's come by being forced to give up. Or, you know, a lot of it was trust too. So when that happened, oh my God, I have not been the same. And, you know, now I understand why everybody says that all the goodies lie with immunity, and because there's still somebody or something that knows that it's that, you know, it's still an ability to know that, to see it, to feel it, to be it. When the no self thing took place, which I didn't know at the time was called no self, I thought, this is really going to make you laugh, okay? I hope it makes you laugh. Someone gave me some hemp cream made out of hemp, and it was like a lotion, and I was using this hemp cream. I thought that I had gotten like super, super high, like so high, like suddenly it hit me that all these days and weeks of using this hemp cream, because I don't get high, I mean, nothing against marijuana, but it's not my medicine. And I thought, oh shoot, it's like I'm like on a big fat heavy duty dose of high here. And I went back to my room, my retreat room. I was hoping no one would see me, and I just kind of like hunkered down, because my reality was so different. And all I can say is like it felt like water was going over a duck's back and it wasn't stopping. It's like my vision could not stop anywhere. It couldn't stabilize. Like I would look at something and it wouldn't stay. It would be, everything was fluid. Fluid. Because there was no landing place anymore. The landing place had been unity, had been a self still as unity. And the self piece was taken away, no more divine center. The divine center is still a landing place. And it's really windy outside. And so it was just blowing. It was just sliding over everything. I couldn't I couldn't focus. I had to get used to living that way, to not having a landing place anymore. Hard to explain. I'm going to have to try someday to write about it or explain it. We don't have time here. And it took like 4 months to, it took longer than that. It took a year or two. But it took 4 months to really just get the hang of it, to talk and walk and eat and drive. And because what happened is that the body has got the self in it. And the training of over time, the conditioning over time is like the I is fused in the body. The I gets taken, the mind gets liberated from the I, the heart reconciles duality, but then the body has to, and I didn't really get this. I didn't really know it to that degree. How much the body, like when we're walking, we learn to walk, we're using language already. We're already a subject, almost object to ourselves. So I am walking. So the I walking goes into the body. I'm eating. So the eating piece is part of the I, and the lifting the fork, the will force is fused with I. All our doing, even if you don't feel like you're a doer anymore, all the doing is still, the I is still fused in the body. And when that goes, then it just operates, it has to go to pure functioning. And that takes a bit of time. Some people may have an easier time. Adya said that he had an easy time. I don't know why Adya had an easy time with all this stuff. I'm always like Miss Drama, dramatic, fireworks, big experiences, yeah. And I think it may be partially because I'm really a sensing being. We have different ways we function. So my sensing was like, an overload, my sensing. So luckily the functioning came in. I just went with the fork and look, it's coming towards the mouth, Look, I'm driving. Watch out, people, the driving's happening, to live that way. It takes time. And you don't have the same orientation anymore, like the self, the unity time is really about giving and selfless service and wanting to share and all that kind of goes out the window. And so a lot of things change. And I'll leave it at that. I know it can be interesting. I certainly find it interesting still because I don't really I don't know what it is that continues functioning. I think it's just God that is so seamless at that point in its functioning that it doesn't need a self to operate anymore. And the self is a wonderful tool, and it helps that in an evolutionary way kind of be what's left. Now, is there anything more? No idea. I still have to use language and use the word I and so on, but it's not a lived experience, And I don't necessarily feel like one should rush the unity time, by the way. If you are in unity or if you're able to be touching in and out of it, enjoy it. Enjoy unity. And it's not like you leave behind anything. It's all integrated. Oneness is a part of life, is truth. Whether you have a self that is experiencing it or not, that is living out that landscape of oneness. Oneness is reality, So all of that still is, it's all integrated like language. We can speak because we've learned language. And then eventually you fly with language, right? You can write poetry and create stuff with words. Okay, well, has this been interesting at all? Give a little thumbs up if it is. It's the first time I'm doing this, so thank you for being part of my experiment. I don't like to usually talk about myself in that way, and some of you are new to coming to see me here, so you get a taste of me in this way. Yeah, I usually just speak to something and let the feeling of the group inform what wants to be shared for that time. And I'm sure some of this sharing is partially created by the group, like maybe pulling out certain threads more than others, because there's so much to this and so much to this personal story. And it's inspiring me to get on track with writing this out. Usually I have time for questions, but we don't have time for that. Let me just go through my notes and see if there's any last thing that stands out. Oh, I wanted to say one more thing about the river is that, so the river metaphor, so then you're one with a river, you are the river when you're in unity. And in the beginning of unity, maybe you feel the divine relationship with the river. You're like in bliss because it's new and you're in relationship to it. But then you get used to it and it becomes more ordinary, and then you're just so ordinary, in fact, that you can't differentiate anymore between yourself and the river. And then the river goes to the ocean, as most rivers do, right? They flow into the ocean. And then you have the vast body of water of a vaster landscape, a large container, really large, almost feels like a boundaryless container. So when you're in unity, towards the end of unity, you feel more boundless. You can't really tell where unity is anymore because it's such a vast container. But there's still an edge to the container, and that's the ocean touching the land. Right? I mean, the ocean is not boundless. It is contained by the land. So that's the self, So the self, eventually, it feels like it's boundless, and it feels one with the divine, one with that, and it's a pretty nice experience to live. And as far as the human experience goes, and then, but then that's still an edge, that's still a boundary, and that the divine, I guess, it pushes itself past that last little boundary to know if it's still possible to function without a sense of self, which is something that's planted by that in us, so we can actually be a self-reflecting, a self-aware being. Without having that, you can't be self-aware. Does that make sense? Without having the ability to look at yourself, you can't be self-aware. It's something that consciousness contains. It's a human consciousness tool. But then the functioning gets to be so pat, you get it so down that you don't need that tool anymore to operate. to have a feeling of you to operate. And that's a whole journey of self, really. From a separate self to a feeling of divine self, and one with life self, right? And then beyond to beyond self. And then that's what's living and always has, but we've just been filtering it through a self-experience. Does that make any sense to you, if that resonates? So that's my map. And it's we have to be true to our own maps. Okay, so I'm going to. I want to say thank you. I'm meant to remember to say thank you for your donations to help this mapless person still function here and feed my dog. And I just wish you all well. And how many here are new to coming to my groups? Kieran, you're new to my group? Oh, nah, you've been, okay. Uno, dos. Raise your hand. 3, 4. Oh, David, you fool. You divine fool, you. Asher, Harris. I mean, some of you know me from other things. I'm just going to look because there's like another page here. I don't know how many people, Karen, yet. And Darius. Nice to meet you. So you're meeting me in a kind of unique moment of this sharing. But it's fun. I appreciate it. And I hope it's interesting. And we're recording this, right? And Shar, this will be on my premium podcast. But maybe I'll make this one not premium. Maybe this will be a free one. So thank you so much for being a part of this, and I hope it's useful to you in some way. I hope you can. How many people here? See, now I want to engage. How many people here feel like you could find yourself somewhere in this map of this sharing? I'm actually looking more to see if someone didn't raise their hand. That's nice. Yeah. If we had more time, I would love to open up discussion. Maybe in the next online meeting, I'll just continue I won't do so much the personal sharing piece, but maybe do it, I don't know, we'll see how it goes, but maybe open it up to questions or something, or wishing to have dialogue about this. So if you want to keep it kind of alive for yourself, I knew when I looked at my calendar before this that I would be needing to have my next online meeting down. And so I'm going to do it really quick while you're all here. Let's do it sooner than later. But I have to check with Shar that if he's free. So Shar, are you free on the September 6th, Saturday?
Did you just say September?
I did. March. March 6th.
Yeah, March.
Come on. Are you free?
Yes, March the 6th. Okay, cool. Yes.
So that means it'll be sooner than later, okay? And that way, for whomever would like to participate, if you, maybe right after we finish, if you want to jot down a question or a thought, if it's alive for you, okay? We can dialogue. Not just intellectual interest, but like what's really happening with you in terms of it, okay? Make it real. Okay, let's everybody unmute yourself so we can say goodbye.
Yeah, goodbye. Not goodbye, because we have no goodbyes.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Everybody.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's like disappearing boxes. Hi, David.
Hi,
We'll catch
Susanne.
up soon. We'll catch up soon.
Right, right. There's more to this journey.
I'm glad.
Oh, yeah.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care.